Welcome to the Power of Connection podcast, where we explore the power of connection in personal relationships, work, and community. Here's your host, Luciano Bonilla.
Hello, welcome to the Power of Connection podcast. Our guest today is Bruce Wayne McLellan. Bruce is a veteran leadership coach with 18 plus years of experience enhancing personal leadership for people. He is also the host of the One Kind World and the Enduring Wonder monthly podcasts. His relevant experience includes 30 years in corporate America as an IT consultant and a lifetime of mindful practice. He is also the author of several books, including Poetry in the Nature of Things, Songs from the Great Wilderness. I met Bruce through Toastmasters, as he is a fellow Toastmaster, in our shared peer-to-peer Toastmasters Club. Let's welcome Bruce today. Welcome, Bruce. Thank you.
Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for having me on your podcast, Luciano. It's my honor to be here.
And I actually been admiring your work for a while. Actually, you had me on your podcast, and it's just amazing just to hear your life story. I got to hear your life story through some of the speeches that you've given and the club, and also through the podcasts that you have given. And it's just been a joy to get to know you. And really, the work that you're doing is crucial in today's time. I wanted to bring Bruce on into this podcast because his work is crucial to really the theme of this podcast of bringing connection to a world that is plagued with loneliness. And so I really wanted to start this podcast with this question: what does connection mean to you?
That is probably one of the most important questions anyone can ask. What does connection mean to you? And I hope the listeners are asking themselves that question as well. For me, and I want you to just lean into this for a second, connection is the most precious commodity in the universe. Let me say that again. Connection is the most precious commodity in the universe. If that's the first time you've heard that or thought that before, stay tuned, because we're going to explore why that is. For me, that started to change very drastically, and it had to change because society raises all of us with a different set of beliefs about what the most important, most precious thing is. For some folks, it's gold. For some folks, it's having a great car. For some folks, it's running a business and that sort of thing. What is the most important thing? It doesn't matter if you're a homeowner, a part of a community, or a business owner, an artist, an entrepreneur. Connection is the most important thing. And part of my foundational belief from that, Luciano, came from a Harvard study. It was a 75-year study. 75 years of studying one idea, which is what makes us happy. I think that's a great question. What truly makes us happy? Because we have a lot of beliefs about what does make us happy. Before I answered that question, and from that, there was some research done relatively recently to look at that more than 50% of people in our society believe that what's going to make them happy is wealth, money. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, except that it's not true. It's not where happiness comes from. Certainly, there's the happy birthday feeling of getting a new car and the new car smell, but just as the new car smell fades, so does the happiness from that. So the great question that Harvard asked, with 4 generations of researchers over the 75 years, is the basic question: what makes us happy as human beings? And with no shadow of doubt, the conclusive answer was this: relationships. Great relationships impact our lifelong happiness and well-being. And that's why I believe, for human beings, connection is the most precious commodity in the entire universe.
It truly is. And as this podcast really started from And when I mentioned in my first introduction podcast, being alone for 14 days for the first time and isolating for a pandemic and realizing how many people are lonely in this world. And you, as a leadership coach, have worked with many people in helping them find their path in life and leadership. And so you've probably seen that that struggle to find that happiness. And so in your work, where have you seen disconnection?
Well, I've seen disconnection not only in my work, but in the communities surrounding us, in the world we live in, and on social media, particularly, uh, and businesses and communities. And it is a disease. In fact, Mother Teresa once said that the worst disease in the West is not leprosy, it's not tuberculosis, it's loneliness. And over 50% of us are experiencing significant loneliness. What that means, Luciano, is when you're walking down the street, half the people that you go by are feeling lonely. They may be smiling, they may be just walking by, seeming calm, but they're experiencing loneliness. Maybe you, as a listener out there, are experiencing loneliness right now. And there's an impact to loneliness. Loneliness creates a physical manifestation in human beings because we are wired for connection. Since the dawn of time, since around the first campfires, we came together and we succeeded as human beings by being in groups and being togetherness and being a we. And it actually became part of our genetic programming that we feel physical, not just emotional, but physical discomfort through loneliness. And of course, whenever we feel discomfort, we're going to try to fix it. And that's when real problems start to happen. Real problems like addiction, stealing, all kinds of crimes. Even the most heinous crimes that we see in the world can be a byproduct of that simple thing, lack of disconnection through loneliness. So I believe it's much more far-reaching than we could ever have imagined.
It is. It's amazing that when I read the book Together by the former U.S. Surgeon General, he was going around the United States. He's like, "Oh, let me find out what's the main health cause," and he thought it was going to be health disease, diabetes, and time again, loneliness came up as the major health factor, just even in the United States, but that's far-reaching, like you said, in the whole world. So, what have you seen are ways to combat isolation, to combat disconnection?
I think that I try to keep things really simple in my coaching business because this is a complicated, chaotic world. So I use something called the 3 C's. So 3 C's connection, get it? Kind of add together. So it's like C to the third power, if you think about it. And the first C is courage. Okay. The second is confidence. And the third is compassion. So let's go back to that very first one. It might be surprised because courage I don't see the connection, initially to that. But the reality is that the main cure for fear, of connection is courage. That if we want to be connected to others, we have to step into vulnerability. And if you've ever stepped into true vulnerability, it can induce a lot of fear because we don't know how we're going to be received. We could be shamed. We don't really know what the consequences are going to be in that circumstance. So having the courage to lean into somebody and snuggle, or the first person to say, I love you, or say, I love working here. I love being in this group. I love being part of this tribe. Being that person that is having the courage, it becomes a champion of connection in that sense. The second C, confidence. Again, what does confidence have to do with it? Well, one of the things I've discovered, and I won't get into it in a lot of detail, is that self-doubt is part of human disease. the most famous people in the world amazingly suffer from self-doubt. So the cure for that is confidence. And understanding how we build confidence, the relationship is trust. And it always starts with ourselves, okay? It starts with trusting me. And one of the ways that I build trust in me is to have integrity. And that's a really big word that means that I do what I promised, okay? And the part that people don't understand is that when I don't do what I promise, let's say I promised Luciano that I'm going to make him a cappuccino, and I don't. Well, he's going to be a little bit disappointed, but he probably is going to forget about it. I'm not, because I made the promise, and there's a part of me that does not trust me anymore. And that's where confidence comes from trusting me. So integrity is not just about integrity with our relationships, which is important, but integrity with ourselves. I call that deep integrity, when we realize any promise we make is a promise to ourselves. And the third C is the most important, because compassion is, and a simple word for compassion, if you don't understand compassion, is kindness. And that's why we have the One Kind Word podcast, because it's a simple thing to understand. And it begins again with ourselves, being kind to ourselves. Ironically, people don't understand that there's a difference between self-care and selfishness. That if I take care of myself, I actually have the capacity for more compassion. In fact, I'm not capable of having compassion until I'm taking care of myself. So self-compassion, self-kindness is the foundation for being compassionate and kind to others. I hope that helps. The 3 C's.
Yes.
Write them down.
Yeah. That's really helpful. It's in a mnemonic, the 3 C's: courage, confidence, and compassion. And you could spend a whole lifetime pursuing what those mean in your life.
There's no doubt about that.
But if we could leave our listeners with, simply what are some ways that you stay connected that can encourage our listeners? Okay, I'm listening to this podcast. I might feel some isolation, some loneliness in my life. What are some ways that you stay connected?
I'm going to give you another acronym. I hope it's
Awesome.
okay. Well, another mnemonic, which is the 3 A's. The first A is attention. The second A is attitude. And the third A is action. So it's all about doing the right attention. So attention really means awareness, being aware. It's the first step to anything, being aware of what's going on inside of me and what's going on inside of other people. If we really look beyond the smile, we might notice that a person's expression, even if they're smiling, seems a little sad. We can be aware of that. We can actually recognize loneliness. So being aware of what's going on, listen, not only just physically listening with our eyes, but listening with our ears as well, listening to the change in tone of a voice. That can give you a clue as to what's going on with somebody. Attitude, the important piece about attitude is what I call tuning into the right radio station. Most people in the world listen to the WIFM. Have you ever heard of it, WIFM? What's in it for me?
Oh, yes.
Right. So they just listen to that in a very self-centered way, and that's the way the world works. And by default, that's how we act. And I suggest that we listen to a different radio station on the AM band, not the FM band, but the INAM. It's not about me. Now that might seem a little bit, it's really about selflessness. Doesn't mean we don't take care of ourselves, because as we said before, we start with kindness to ourselves, and we never forget that. It's not about me is the attitude that allows me to show up as someone who's capable of connection, because it's not about me. When I show up for someone as a coach, it's not about me, it's about them. When I show up for someone as their dad, it's not about me, it's about them. For my spouse, same thing. It's not about me, it's about them. And the last one is action. And there's a lot of actions that you can take if you have attention and the right attitude. But here's one that I particularly love, and that is to listen to somebody not because you're interested in the topic they're talking about, because you're interested in them. Again, making it about them. So I know a lot of people that have political ideas and philosophical ideas and religious ideas and dieting ideas that are very different from mine. But it's not about me. And when I listen to them because I'm interested in them, it's amazing how connection can grow, how quickly connection can grow when I make it about them. I hope that helps the 3 A's.
Yes, there's so much greatness and nuggets of wisdom I think you've given us today, and really to have that awareness that loneliness could be a part of our lives. And there's something you mentioned in that last part of what we could do to stay connected, and it made me think of a real subtle disconnection that people might not realize is the tribalism and the polarization of this world. And if we can just think about, it's not about my ideas, it's not about me inflicting my ideas on you, but how can we listen to each other and pay attention to each other? That's beautiful. It would be a different world if all of us were aspiring to those actions and ways to stay connected. And so there's so much that we could take from this. And thank you so much for your time coming on to this podcast. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Luciano. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Bruce McLellan is a leadership coach and author. He is the host of several podcasts, including One Kind World and Enduring World podcasts, which I will share in the links on the notes page of this podcast. Thank you for joining us. This is the Power of Connection podcast.